From headlines to human insight, this is your trusted daily briefing from Neural Newscast.
Neural Newscast Global. I'm Andrew Lindbeck. Today is August 20th, 2025. On this day in, the Library of Congress marks August 20th for a notable historical event whose records highlight its lasting impact on American cultural and archival heritage. Political shifts and debates ahead. Brazil's federal police say they found a draft asylum request to Argentina on Jair Bolsonaro's phone, officials report. Here's Cassandra Joyce with more.
Brazil's federal police say they find a draft asylum request to Argentina on Jair Bolsonaro's phone. The document, addressed to President Javier Milei, surfaces during a probe into alleged efforts to overturn Brazil's 2022 election. Bolsonaro denies wrongdoing and frames the investigations as political. That view reflects one perspective in a polarized debate over accountability versus persecution. Prosecutors argue the evidence supports charges related to an attempted coup. Legal experts note asylum requests are common in political crises but do not prove guilt. Argentina has not publicly granted asylum, and diplomatic implications remain part of ongoing discussions.
Texas lawmakers approved a new congressional map that critics say entrenches Republican advantage across the state. Here's Daniel Grove with more.
Texas lawmakers passed new congressional maps that strengthen Republican control. The GOP majority advances the plan after some Democrats leave the state to delay a vote. Republicans argue the maps reflect population shifts and ensure clear representation. Democrats call it partisan gerrymandering that dilutes minority voters' power. That dispute is part of a long-running national fight over redistricting rules and voting rights. Legal challenges are possible, and courts often decide whether maps meet federal standards for fairness and equal protection.
Prosecutors say more associates and supporters linked to Mayor Eric Adams face new corruption charges in New York City. Here's Monica Kellen with more.
A close friend of New York City Mayor Eric Adams, whom he appointed to a senior city role, is expected to surrender in coming days as prosecutors pursue new corruption charges against multiple Adams associates. The mayor denies wrongdoing and says his team cooperates with investigators. Supporters call the probes overreach. Critics argue they reveal systemic favoritism and weak safeguards. That debate mirrors a broader fight over ethics enforcement in city government, one perspective in ongoing discussions about transparency, accountability, and political patronage.
President Trump's approach is forcing opponents to pay or concede, reshaping negotiations across institutions and industries. Here's Ethan Wells with more.
President Donald Trump presses opponents to pay or concede, often after he escalates disputes. Universities, trading partners, and law firms agree to spend more or settle on his terms to end standoffs. Supporters call this tough negotiating that secures taxpayer value and deters bad actors. Critics argue it politicizes policy, chills academic independence, and risks retaliation abroad. These are competing perspectives in an ongoing debate over transactional governance. The broader question remains, does hardball dealmaking deliver durable results or short-term wins?
Israel's planning authorities advanced a major settlement project near Jerusalem, a move with broad diplomatic implications. Here's Sarah Wheaton with more.
Israel's planning authorities advanced the E1 settlement project near Jerusalem, a step long delayed. The plan adds thousands of housing units and further splits parts of the West Bank envisioned for a future Palestinian state. Israeli hardliners celebrate it as strengthening security and demographic continuity. That is one perspective. Palestinian leaders and many international governments argue it undermines a viable two-state solution. Supporters frame approvals as legal and necessary. Critics call them illegal under international law. The debate remains part of ongoing negotiations and pressure campaigns. This is Sarah Wheaton for Neural Newscast.
Across continents, here's what's happening. Israeli forces say they have begun the first stages of an assault on Gaza City, calling for massive reservist call-ups. Here's Monica Kellen with more.
Israel says it launches the first stages of an assault on Gaza City. The military issues call-up letters to 60,000 reservists to bolster the campaign. Officials framed the operation as a sustained push that could run into next year. Forces concentrate on urban strongholds, command sites, and tunnel networks. The move follows months of cross-border fire and intermittent truces that failed to hold. Humanitarian agencies warn of worsening conditions for civilians as fighting intensifies. Israel's leadership says the goal is to degrade militant capabilities and secure southern communities.
Residents of Gaza City brace for a major operation, weighing evacuation under worsening humanitarian conditions. Here's Daniel Grove with more.
Israel prepares a new operation in Gaza City, forcing families to weigh flight or shelter. The army orders evacuations from dense northern neighborhoods and warns of intense combat. Gaza City, the Strip's most populous urban center, faces fresh strikes on roads, homes, and suspected militant sites. Aid groups report shortages of water, fuel, and medicine as crossings tighten. Hospitals struggle to move patients while power flickers amid limited generators. Residents pack documents and food, fearing street fighting and siege conditions. Regional diplomats urge restraint and humanitarian corridors to prevent a wider crisis.
A weaponized drone explosion in Port-au-Prince has left officers dead and more wounded, officials say. Here's Samuel Green with more.
2 Haitian SWAT officers die, and 6 others suffer injuries after a weaponized drone explodes at a police base in Port-au-Prince. Police say the drone is intended for operations against gangs, but detonates before deployment. The blast underscores the escalating use of drones in Haiti's fight against heavily armed groups. It also raises urgent questions about training, safety, and oversight of lethal technology. Authorities secure the base and open an inquiry into how the device is handled and armed. This is Samuel Green for Neural Newscast.
For economic analysis, here's what's new. Federal Reserve officials remain divided over how to interpret mixed economic signals from recent data, minutes show. Here's Ethan Wells with more.
Federal Reserve officials split on how to read the economy at their July meeting. Minutes show a cooling job market alongside inflation still above the 2% target. Some policymakers warn easing too soon could reignite price pressures. Others see rising unemployment risks and argue for patience. The debate centers on how fast inflation slows without derailing growth. Markets now watch the September meeting for guidance on rates. The Fed repeats its goal: restore price stability while sustaining the expansion.
U.S. businesses say Trump's tariff policies have pushed them into survival mode, despite a temporary pause on new duties. Here's Cassandra Joyce with more.
A 90-day pause on new China tariffs brings no relief to U.S. importers already paying steep duties under President Donald Trump. Businesses describe survival mode as tariffs on hundreds of billions in goods raise costs and squeeze margins. Many pass increases to customers, delay hiring, or cut investment. Retailers and manufacturers report disrupted supply chains and higher prices for components, from electronics to machinery. Economists warn prolonged tariffs can slow growth and fuel inflation. Companies urge clear timelines and exemptions to plan beyond the pause. This is Cassandra Joyce for Neural Newscast.
Fast, reliable, and powered by the future today. This is Neural Newscast. Catch every episode at nnewscast.com.
I'll look at what's new in technology. IBM and NASA have released an open-source AI model to forecast solar weather, helping protect satellites and power grids. Here's Kara Swift with more.
IBM and NASA launched an open-source AI model on Hugging Face to forecast solar weather. The tool predicts solar storms hours to days ahead, helping protect satellites, power grids, and communications. It trains on decades of NASA space weather data and runs on foundation models. Developers can download it today and fine-tune for regional risk. Better alerts mean fewer outages and safer spacecraft operations. One researcher says it turns space weather into actionable warnings for operators on the ground. This is Kara Swift for Neural Newscast.
From the Health Desk, here's what's new. Researchers are testing anti-inflammatory approaches that could open new treatment avenues for brain health and mental illness. Here's Laura Navarro with more.
A new approach to brain health targets chronic inflammation, and it could change lives. For decades, psychiatric drugs barely moved beyond 1960s designs. Researchers now test therapies that block inflammatory signals linked to depression, anxiety, and brain fog. The goal: faster relief, fewer side effects, and personalized care. Doctors could combine anti-inflammatory medicines with talk therapy and sleep, nutrition, and exercise plans. Patients who don't respond to standard antidepressants may finally get options. One expert calls it a needed reset for mental health treatment.
5 deaths have been reported amid a Legionnaires' disease outbreak in central Harlem, health officials confirm. Here's Isabella Wright with more.
5 people die amid a Legionnaires' disease outbreak in central Harlem. Health officials confirm dozens of infections from bacteria spread through contaminated water systems. The illness causes severe pneumonia, high fever, cough, and shortness of breath. Older adults, smokers, and people with chronic lung disease face the highest risk. Residents should avoid mist from showers and humidifiers until systems are cleared. Use bottled or boiled water for drinking and brushing teeth. Anyone with flu-like symptoms should seek care immediately. Early treatment with antibiotics saves lives. This is Isabella Wright for Neural Newscast.
Now, let's explore environmental stories. Flooding has begun in North Carolina's Outer Banks as Hurricane Erin moves north along the east coast. Here's Samuel Green with more.
Flooding begins in North Carolina's Outer Banks today as Hurricane Erin moves north along the coast. Local officials urge residents and visitors to shelter in place and avoid flooded roads. Storm surge and heavy rain push water onto Highway 12 and low-lying neighborhoods. Forecasters warn of life-threatening rip currents along much of the East Coast, from Florida to New England. Beaches face dangerous surf and strong longshore currents through the next 24 to 48 hours. Ferries suspend some service, and coastal parks close early. Stay out of the water, the National Weather Service says.
Conservationists report a small but promising comeback for the endangered dusky gopher frog in Mississippi. Here's Amelia Richardson with more.
A rare southern amphibian gets a lifeline. Fewer than 100 dusky gopher frogs remain, but new efforts in Mississippi boost their numbers. Wildlife teams restore longleaf pine habitat, reopen sandy burrows, and breed tadpoles for release. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service lists the species as endangered. Biologists say recovery takes years, yet early counts rise. One calls it hard-won progress, with more ponds and sites slated for 2025. This is Amelia Richardson for Neural Newscast.
Now, let's check in on sports. Fantasy football managers get fresh draft prep and rankings for the 2025 season ahead of preseason play. Here's Thomas Golding with more.
Fantasy football managers get a full 2025 draft roadmap today. A new guide lays out top 150 overall rankings, position tiers, and rookie outlooks after preseason camps. It packs auction values, keeper advice, and multiple mock drafts to test strategies. Managers can compare half PPR and PPR formats, spot breakout candidates, and avoid traps. The goal is simple: build a balanced roster and win Week 1 through December. This is Thomas Golding for Neural Newscast.
Now let's cover the latest political moves. Parents demand legislative action after children were lost in floods, pressing for stronger camp safety rules in Texas. Here's Laura Navarro with more.
Parents of children, they want clear standards, regular inspections, and real-time alerts tied to river gauges. Lawmakers signal bipartisan interest in new rules this session. One parent says no family should ever get that call. This is Laura Navarro for Neural Newscast.
Now, let's report on the economy. A primer explains how the Bank of England sets interest rates and when they might fall further for consumers. Here's Jason Miller with more.
The Bank of England sets the base interest rate, which shapes mortgage, loan, and savings costs for millions. Its rate decisions aim to control inflation and support stable growth. When inflation cools toward the 2% target, the bank may cut rates. Lower rates typically ease borrowing but reduce savings returns. Changes usually flow through lenders within weeks. though fixed-rate deals adjust only at renewal. Policymakers review the rate roughly every 6 weeks. This is Jason Miller for Neural Newscast.
Digital breakthroughs and discoveries. IBM and NASA's Solar Weather AI aims to turn space weather data into actionable warnings for operators worldwide. Here's Benjamin Carter with more.
IBM and NASA launch an open-source AI model on Hugging Face to forecast solar weather. The tool predicts solar storms hours to days ahead, helping protect satellites, power grids, and communications. It trains on decades of NASA space weather data and runs on foundation models. Developers can download it today and fine-tune for regional risk. Better alerts mean fewer outages and safer spacecraft operations. One researcher says it turns space weather into actionable warnings for operators on the ground. This is Benjamin Carter for Neural Newscast.
Here's another story we're following. That wraps our roundup for today. Stay tuned for continuous updates on these stories and more.
You've been listening to Neural Newscast, AI-powered, human-reviewed. For past episodes, visit neuralnewscast.com. Neural Newscast combines real voice recordings with synthesized voices to enable prompt production without sacrificing quality. All content is generated using advanced AI algorithms developed by a human and undergoes fact-checking and human review prior to release. While we strive for factual, non-biased reporting and actively work to prevent AI hallucinations, AI-generated content can occasionally contain errors. Listeners are encouraged to verify critical information from trusted sources. For more details on our AI transparency policies, visit nnewscast.com.